Eric, thank you very much for your beautiful words and introduction. I'm just sorry my mother wasn't here to hear it. She would love it. Eric knows that my mother loves Eric. So thank you very much for inviting me to speak to the World Affairs Council here in Los Angeles. I agree with part of what you said, that it is a center stage for ideas, but what I love about it is it celebrates ideas. It really is an opportunity for, call it a safe space, for people who might actually disagree with each other on an intellectual level to express that without making it seem like you've gone on the attack and you think the other person's a horrible human being. I actually had that experience recently in what you would think would be a safe space. It was actually a law school, where I got an opportunity to speak on behalf of the District Attorney's Office and explain what I've been up to. What I explained to those law students that day is that I started with what the District Attorney's Office is all about. It's the largest local prosecuting office in the United States. We prosecute 180,000 criminal cases, and we do it in a geographic area that's one of the largest counties in the entire United States, over 4,000 square miles, going from Long Beach to Lancaster, from Santa Monica to the city of LA, to the San Gabriel, Santa Clarita, and San Fernando valleys. This is a large operation. I have 800 prosecutors. I have over 2,100 total employees involving support staff and investigators. My budget's over $500 million. So again, what I explained to the law students that day is that we're dealing with a serious operation that we have to get right. What I also explained to the law students that day is that when I came into office, there was a lack of trust in three of the most significant groups that I actually have to have trust with in the DA's office in order to succeed. Starting with my own prosecutors, those 800 prosecutors, law enforcement, and victims. Because when I came in, those prosecutors, those 800 prosecutors, had actually voted in a straw vote, 98%, to support the recall of my predecessor, George Gascon. That's a level of dysfunction that you rarely see in an organization, whether it's a private or a public organization. So I had to get the trust back with those prosecutors immediately. Law enforcement. Law enforcement had viewed its relationship with the DA's office, and the nicest way to put it is strained, frayed. That they viewed the DA as more interested in prosecuting law enforcement officers than in partnering with them. And it doesn't work. If there's any daylight between law enforcement and district attorney's office, the group that's going to seize that daylight are the criminals. So I had to get the trust back with law enforcement immediately. Victims groups. In some ways, this is one of the more tragic groups that had felt abandoned, and quite correctly so. When a district attorney, my predecessor, says on his first day in office that the DA's office will no longer accompany victim families who have watched sons or daughters be murdered, and the murderer is up for a parole hearing, and the murderer has counsel. There's a parole board, there's the victim family, and what used to be the prosecutor there, not only to give comfort to the victim family, but because the prosecutor gets access to the information that the parole board considers and can make the best argument on behalf of the victim family, my predecessor said no longer would prosecutors be able to go with these victim families to parole hearings. So on my first day in office, literally within the first hour, those special directives that you talked about, the 9 special directives that set up a decarceration political agenda, I reversed. I literally basically rescinded all 9 of them. And in doing them, I did the following. I did not replace a political agenda of decarceration with another political agenda that you could call mass incarceration. Because both of these political ideologies are not grounded in the two things that prosecutors have always pursued until, other than the last 4 years, which was the facts of the law. So when I said that I'm going to adopt a slightly but more important, a very important shift in the approach, and I called it the hard work middle, or the hard middle approach. And the idea is we're going to get rid of blanket policies. They're lazy. We're actually going to do the hard work. We're going to look at each individual case individually and the individual defendant and their background, the crime committed, and the impact on the victim to determine who the true threats are to our society. And those are often the repeat offenders. And yes, those are repeat offenders will have to go to jail or prison. But just as importantly, your first-time non-violent offender, that is a situation where that person has to be held accountable. They need to pay their debt back to society for violating society's laws. But that's where non-prison alternatives come into play, whether it's community service, whether it's restitution, pay it back if you stole something, or if you have a serious drug addiction, we're going to give you a choice. You can go to prison, or you can do an 18-month intensive rehab program that if you get through it, we're going to give you a certificate and wipe the crime off your record. This is the hard middle approach that basically got the prosecutors back on track. Because these are folks that have given up their life to serve the goals of justice for the people of this county. They were off mission for 4 years in the sense that they were on mission, but the DA supported them, was off mission. Now they're back on mission. And we've been working very hard. Thank you. We've been working very hard to get that morale back. The second group, law enforcement. When I basically said to law enforcement, I said, look, I'm going to get rid of this political agenda. You bring us good cases, chock full of evidence beyond a reasonable doubt, and my assurance is that we'll give a fair shot to each and every one of those cases. And I have gone to, there's 21 police LAPD divisions. I've been to most of them. There's 18 sheriff stations. I've been to most of them. There are 45 local police agencies. I had no idea as a civilian. Now I do. I've been to most of them. And I don't just talk to the upper management. I actually meet with the officers and give them the same variation of this speech, which is that the DA's office is now open for business. Bring us those cases and we will fairly and timely evaluate each and every one of them. And with victims groups, I've met with, it's usually mothers of some groups you never want to be part of. Parents for murdered children, justice for murdered children. And I've gone to their meetings. I've gone to meet with these parents who entered this unfortunate group. But they're amazing. They literally are amazing. I mean, God forbid that should ever happen to me or someone I love. I don't know what you want to do. Maybe crawl under a rock and never be seen again. These folks go out in the community and they say, look, we are going to stand for these kids that got murdered. We're going to actually make sure society does better in the future so we don't have murdered children. And for all the new people who had to enter their groups, they open up their loving arms and they bring them in. They're amazing people. And I made sure they understand that the DA's office fully supports them at this point. So we're going to have hopefully a great session. We can go into specifics of the different types of policies that we've changed, the impact of those policies. I'll give you a quick highlight. I prioritize 6 areas because these are the 6 areas when I've talked to literally thousands of people over the last 2.5 years. These are the 6 areas that really affected their lives. Residential burglaries, organized retail theft, fentanyl poisoning, homeless crime, human trafficking, and hate crimes. Those are our 6 priority areas, but it doesn't mean that when wildfires show up on January 7th, all of a sudden I didn't even know there was a category of crime called wildfire-related crime. But we went after the looters, we went after the price gougers, the arsonists, the financial scammers, and we set a very straightforward line. If you want to take advantage of the vulnerable, you're going to be arrested, prosecuted, and punished. And by the way, this is your warning. Because ultimately when people say, what would you consider the true success? I say, first, I would not consider success by merely filling the jails to the breaking point. If anything, I tell people that is the failure of the criminal justice system. So what is success? Can I deter criminals from committing crimes in the first place? Thus saving a whole lot of victims in the process. If I can accomplish that in 4 years with the help of my 800 amazing prosecutors, many of them, the ones that are here today, please raise your hand. These are investigators, law enforcement, even the victim groups, and certainly the public, then we will have succeeded. So why don't we turn to a question and answer? And I said, look, nothing is off limits, even a Menendez question. If you have to answer a Menendez question, I will. Read your word. If you choose not to ask, well, that is your choice. So thank you very much.
I think you guys covered it, so we're done. Enjoy your lunch. No, seriously, I thought I was unique in discovering that, hey, we're going to be meeting. What a coincidence on the 1-year anniversary of your election. So congratulations on that. Congratulations to all of us and to the folks in the prosecutor's office. Thank you for your work. That is tough. That's tough work. I used to be a crime reporter. Right? Well, most reporters start off doing, cops and courts. And one of the things that I discovered back then was that people in your position have a bullseye on them. And it's probably no secret that there are security folks here in the room with us. And I think it often goes understated. It takes courage to run, and it takes courage if you won. What is that like? Do they hustle you back on election night and close the door and tell you, here's a long list of people who would like to see you hurt?
I do have security, much to my wife's and family's chagrin, because they have to deal with it as well. They're incredible. They'll stay in the background. They protect me and they protect the office. And what it shows to me is, there are some people out there. We actually are doing a trial right now against 5 of the most vicious MS-13 murderers that you can have. And they did a closing argument yesterday. I actually attended that closing argument. And these are vicious murderers. And I'm sure at some point that when we do convict them with the federal government's help, they're not going to be happy, and so be it. It's just one more of the things that you put in the calculus if you want to be the DA, and you just move forward. I deal with individual deputy district attorneys that have been threatened. Some have actually had to change their name because they were directly threatened. And again, they keep coming back and doing the job. This is what, quite candidly, is so inspiring about the job that I've been lucky enough to get. It's that I get to work with 2,100, but 800 prosecutors who are the most talented, experienced, and committed prosecutors in the nation. They're that good. Whether it's gang cases, drug cases, major crime cases, cases involving juveniles, all the different types of fraud, elder abuse, public corruption. These are some of the best prosecutors out there in the entire country. So it's worth the inconvenience, and I'll call it an inconvenience, of having to deal with, I had a BLM. I'll give you one situation. BLM actually protests 4 o'clock every Wednesday, today's Wednesday, 4 o'clock in the Hall of Justice. You want to see them screaming about what I've done wrong, which I don't really understand yet as to what I've done wrong. They just scream about it. But on a Saturday morning, I did a radio interview in Crenshaw at one of the black radio stations. And when I got out, I saw these people marching. Now, I like a good march. I respect a good march. And then I saw them marching at me, and they had their phones out, and they're live streaming the whole thing. And I actually was on the way to go to somewhere else, so I had my dog with me. We're walking the dog around the block, and they're coming. And so we jump into the car, and they surround the car. And they're not letting us go. Police eventually had to get called. And once the police were there, I decided, you know what? It's time for me to live stream. So I took my phone out, and I hit the record button, and I went out there and I said, what do you want to talk about? And that's the point. I said, we can meet here at the World Affairs Council and we can have a nice discussion, or you can scream and surround my car. And when I confronted them, they had no answer. And I said, if you want to make an appointment and come to my office and we'll sit across the table and we'll discuss it, fine, I'm happy to do it. They weren't interested. And so the groups that aren't interested in actually having this discussion, because if they have a legitimate concern, I'll listen to it. I've spoken to Jewish groups, I've spoken to Muslim groups, I've spoken to Sikh groups, and they have some serious concerns on how my office has dealt with hate crimes and a whole variety of crimes over not just the last year, but the last 10 to 15 to 20 years. And a lot of their ideas are right on. There are solutions we might disagree with, and that's fine. But if they have a better way of doing things than I'm doing now, hallelujah, bring it in. Here's how I'm not afraid of that idea. I will adopt that idea, I will scale it up if it's good, and I'll give them the credit for it if they want it. And I actually say that to my own deputy district attorneys or anybody in my office. If you think there's a better way of doing anything we are doing right now, tell me what it is, and if you're right, we'll adopt it, scale it, and give you the credit.
Your election was almost like, it was one of those signs that a fever had broken. And, you know, I'm just putting my cards on the table. It did seem like the state was in the grip of a fever in which suddenly criminals were the victims, and the victims were collateral damage that had to be expected in pursuit of some kind of social justice. But you weren't alone. As you're coming into the race, you began to endorse and really push for Prop 36. And I'd like you to talk about kind of the broader success of that initiative all over the state, even in the Bay Area. It's pretty remarkable. If I could just point out two things up there. Most of the folks here will know that the DA in San Francisco, Chase Boudin, was thrown out a couple of years before your election. Boudin, part of that kind of very progressive, it looked more like they were public defenders than prosecutors, and was very much a George Gascon character. Pamela Price up in Alameda County as well was thrown out during your election. So you had this broader sweep of Prop 36 and these other progressive prosecutors. I wonder if you could talk about what Prop 36 did and whether it gives you tools, what tools it might give you. There are some problems there, I understand. So maybe talk about that background, if you would, real quickly.
Absolutely. So my election signified for me when we did a sort of an autopsy of the election as to why we won. Turns out that safety was a crossover issue. That safety resonated if you were on the far left or you were on the far right. And what really drove it home for so many people is that they watched the prior DA's political ideology of decarceration actually play out in their communities. And quite candidly, if it had succeeded, if somehow safety had gotten better, people were feeling more safe, more secure for their families at night, during the day, then yeah, he probably would have been reelected. But when you take accountability out of the mix, and again, as you heard, this hard middle approach is proportional, smart, common sense accountability, based in large part because I've spent 10 years as a prosecutor, but 25 years as a defense counsel. I understand that there has to be a balance in the system. So when we brought that into bear, then at the same time, Proposition 36 was out there making this point. Let's give the prosecutors some additional tools to go after chronic thieves and chronic illegal hard drug users. So in order to trigger a Proposition 36 felony prosecution, the person has to have 2 prior theft-related convictions. Again, so that means that they got convicted once, it didn't dissuade them, they got convicted twice, it didn't dissuade them. Now they're about to steal, whether it's just under $950 or something along those lines. And not just once. Because what was happening before Proposition 36 is that you could steal every day, and they weren't aggregating the amount. I was dealing with 7-Eleven owners, and I met with a whole bunch of them. What they were telling me, and by the way, as a quick footnote, every 7-Eleven that you see is individually owned. There is no corporate-owned 7-Eleven. It generally means some family put their life savings to buy a 7-Eleven franchise, and generally they've been pretty profitable. That's why you see so many 7-Eleven owners working 6 and 7 days and having a whole family work there because the family owns it. Now what was happening, and they were getting apoplectic, is that people were coming in every day or every other day, stealing a certain amount. One of the examples that they gave me was the guy who came in, he'd get the coffee and the donuts in the morning, he'd wave goodbye, and then he'd come back to the 6-pack of beer in the afternoon on a regular basis. It was literally watching their profits walk out the door. Proposition 36 comes in, and now law enforcement can go ahead and arrest that person for a felony. If they're arrested for a felony, they won't be arrested in the morning and out by the afternoon. Also, now the judges will consider that whole criminal history and decided whether or not this particular person needs to spend some time in jail or prison. And they've been given a lot of chances, it's not working, and this is what we need to do to protect our society. So since January of 2025, we brought over 2,400 Proposition 36 felony prosecutions against these chronic and repeat thieves. And it's starting to make a difference. Or that same 7-Eleven owner, came to report to me, he says, look, the two guys who have been literally taking all our stuff for the last 2 years, so much so that they had actually given up making police reports because they thought it was useless. Now those two people are in jail. And hopefully they'll learn from the experience.
Let's jump quickly, because about 5 minutes ago I got the 5-minute warning. So I wonder if you could talk to us about the June anti-ICE demonstrations that turned, in some cases, into riots. The LAPD chief gets on national news in a press conference and says we're overwhelmed. The president helpfully sends in the National Guard as well as 700 Marine Corps guys from Pendleton. I'm wondering, what's it like for you in this environment where you've got a federal government that is determined to exercise, I think, its lawful authority vis-a-vis immigration and naturalization, in a community, however, where you and I grew up. I mean, I grew up here, most of the folks who here did. We grew up in an environment of lots of undocumented people around us, lots of documented immigrants. We want to make sure we understand that. But this has become kind of just the natural order of things for many of us, and now it's disrupted. What's it like when you've got a sanctuary county, a sanctuary city, a sanctuary state, and you're trying to deal with federal law?
So it was very important as the DA of this county was to provide people with some information so they would understand and be able to contextualize what was going on. So the first piece of information that we put out at many press conferences on this is that the DA's office is not consulted with, is not involved with, does not participate with federal civil immigration enforcement, nor, by the way, does local, whether it's the sheriffs, the LAPD, or any of the local law enforcement. They basically do what they're going to do, and then we have to react after they've done it in the community. That was point number one. Point number two is that for the hundreds of thousands of people that wanted to peacefully and lawfully protest, we would fiercely protect that right to protest. And for the police, that means they're going to shut down streets, they're going to do overtime. Though the police departments are spending literally hundreds of thousands of dollars to make sure that hundreds of thousands of people could peacefully and lawfully protest. Fantastic. However, for the people, and I'm going to contextualize this, 10 million people in our county, if you assume that 99.8% of people didn't protest at all. And amongst that, the 200,000 or so people that protested, we estimate about 500 were committing criminal acts, roughly. And those could range from everything from shooting commercial-grade fireworks into the police officers, running motorcycles into police officers, dropping cinder blocks and bricks on police cars and lighting them on fire. Our message was very simple. If you cross that line between protected First Amendment activity and illegal conduct, we will arrest you, we will prosecute you, and we will punish you. So don't do it. That was their warning. And I issued that warning over and over again as we were prosecuting people who had crossed the line. Turns out it was a very small number in the context of our overall population. So then the politicians got into it, whether it was the president, the governor, the mayor. And I said, look, the DA's office is going to stay below the political squabbles. We're just going to keep people safe in this community. If they want to go ahead and send 4,700 National Guardsmen and Marines to guard 3 federal buildings, and they think that's a good idea, great. Could I have used those resources to go after human traffickers, fentanyl poisoners, and gangbangers? 100%. They still want to send them to me? Hallelujah. But again, that is the position that we took on that issue and similar type of issues where we'll do our job and then, again, ideally keep below the political squabbling that has people obviously very concerned.
Well, I've got 10 more questions and about 12 hours to ask them, so I just got told we're done, however. I want to thank the LA World Affairs Council for inviting us to have this conversation. Thank you for running, winning, and enforcing the law and protecting us. I'm really grateful. And your colleagues who are here. Thank you all.